It was the mid-70s, and New York was under the Great Depression. There was poverty, there was chaos, there was mayhem, and the city itself was on the absolute verge of bankruptcy. Things were not looking good until one man burst onto the scene. Donald fucking Trump, an ambitious young lad, fresh out of college, and moved straight to Manhattan to join his dad in the real estate business, Fred Trump. While he had Trump under his wing, his dad was under some trouble. Yeah, his flats were popular and successful, but there were rumours floating around that there was a scandal that involved racketeering and corruption, but nothing was proven. After the scandal, he eventually passed on his business to his son, and then it went from there. A building that came under Trump's radar, known as the Commodore Hotel, was standing on its last legs and was on the verge of shutting down. Naturally, Trump seized this as an opportunity and went forward to put his plan into execution. The plan was to buy the hotel, rebuild it, and hope for the best. The first step was to get a tax break on the building. Knowing for Trump that this would be probably the most effective way to get his project off the ground. But of course, something as beneficial as a tax break wouldn't be so easy to get.
The Trump real estate interests are willing to put up to $100 million to refurbish this hotel. The question is, will the city grant a 40-year tax abatement?
His reputation was on the line. And if this fell through for any reason, if the city rejected him, this would be a horrible thing in his career.
There was no way on God's earth that the city would grant a tax break to a bunch of billionaires. While the city was broke, the idea at the time just seemed really absurd and a tad bit risky. So naturally, they were going to settle this in court. And with this being a serious legal battle, no way they were going to get some two-bit lawyer to fight the case. Trump knew he needed serious help. So you might be wondering, who did he turn to?
One of the most striking things about Donald's life is that at the age of 28, he meets Roy Cohn. And anybody else would be repulsed. I knew Roy Cohn. He was the most repulsive figure I ever met in my life.
So, who's Roy Cohn? And is he as bad as the guy mentioned? Well, I'll let this speak for itself.
Exposing these communists, these traitors.
He persuaded one suspect to testify against his own sister, sending her to the electric chair. He led an investigation to root out homosexuals in public life, even though he was gay himself.
I feel like I was in the presence of Satan.
Yeah, he's a bit of a bastard, like. He was also known for defending big-time criminals who were a part of the mafia, and he was able to get them out of a tough jam. So if he could do that, he was perfect to get Trump the tax break he wanted.
Young Donald Trump meets this guy and says, I gotta have him. I gotta have him.
Now, the outcome was obvious. Trump won the court case and got cracking on the Commodore Hotel. A few years later, it would be reopened as the Grand Hyatt. During the construction of the Grand Hyatt, his dad loaned him, and dare I say it, a small loan of $1 million. That's where it came from.
My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. I came into Manhattan, and I had to pay him back, and I had to pay him back with interest. But I came into Manhattan, I started buying up properties, and I did great. And then I built the Grand Hyatt, and I got involved with the convention, so I did a good job.
Now, Donald Trump in the 80s is where things got good. His hotel became a smash hit, and he had his eye on another building that was in the middle of construction that would later on become Trump's magnus opus, Trump Tower. And again, when it opened in 83, it was a massive hit, and it would become his main base of operations. But during the construction process, Trump wanted to get another tax break on the building while dealing with a new up-and-coming mayor, who eventually got the position and was so against Trump getting another tax break. Long story short, Trump won the break. The current mayor at the time, Ed Koch, absolutely loathed Trump. Hell, they loathed each other. They were at each other's throats throughout the majority of the 80s.
I'm saying that Ed Koch could do everybody a huge favor if he got out of office and if they started all over again.
You call the mayor a moron.
Say he's got no talent and only moderate intelligence.
New York City has a different mayor at some point because I think Ed Koch is a total disaster.
They didn't like each other. Another interesting thing to note about Trump Tower is that certain trade deals to get the tower constructed, mainly concrete, were deals from the mafia.
In that period of time, the reality was certain trades had mafia connections, concrete in particular.
But either way, the mafia in general have such a dangerous reputation. Trump's dad had to step in and basically tell him, hell fucking no, you are not to go anywhere near them.
On Trump Tower, Donald didn't deal with the mob. His father made sure of that.
Fred came to my chairman and said, keep him away from the mafia. He has a propensity to want to deal with them.
This was obviously the influence of Roy Cohn and his connections. After all, he and Donald Trump were business partners.
In 1980s New York, the unions and the mob were a fact of life for anybody working in construction.
As time went on, Roy Cohn was diagnosed with AIDS, and him and Trump began to drift further apart. As his condition got worse, he had one final thing to say about Trump.
Cohn said in almost grudging respect, Donald pisses ice water.
Chillin' fucking last message. After Roy Cohn passes away, Trump continued with his endeavours. One of them was he wanted to build the world's tallest building.
New Yorkers want to have the world's tallest building, and frankly, so do I.
But of course, this time, New York really put their foot down and said, fuck no, no more fucking tax breaks. So naturally, he didn't get it, and the world's tallest building wasn't built. But that's okay. To Trump, that was a small loss, because what came next was the start of his empire. Enter Atlantic City, where gambling was not long legalized and casinos were popping out of the ground. Trump decided to get into the casino biz and bam, started building casinos of his own. The first one was in 84, Trump Plaza. His second one was in 85, Trump Castle. I mean, Trump was fucking killing it. No question about it. He had his own airline. He had his own yacht. He bought the Plaza Hotel in New York. His own fucking mansion in Florida. Oh, it was the dream. At one point, he even owned his own American footy team. But that was short-lived because he had legal troubles with the NFL.
He helped launch a competitor to the NFL called the U.S. Football League, and then launched a lawsuit against the NFL when the USFL failed.
The jury in the case delivered its verdict. It ruled the NFL did indeed monopolize pro football, but it awarded damages of just $1.
I mean, coming out with only $1 after a lawsuit against the NFL is a bit shit, but apart from that, things were still going well. Like, he published a book called The Art of the Deal, and that becomes a bestseller. This amount of success was so overwhelming to ignore that Trump even considered running for president when someone encouraged him to do so. But his final decision was not to run.
I'm not looking to run for president. I love what I'm doing, and what I want is I want strength and extreme competence at the helm of this country.
Even talk show giant Oprah Winfrey was asking the same thing.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not.
Trump didn't see a point because things were looking bright. Well, until 89 happened.
5 men have been killed in a helicopter crash in New Jersey. 3 of the 5 were top executives in Donald Trump's Atlantic City casino empire.
Trump cheated death. The flight was supposed to go from New York to Atlantic City, but because Trump's helicopter was running late and he didn't trust any other helicopter firm other than his own, he came up with some excuse not to get on the chopper that was rented from an outside company that eventually crashed. What a fucking close call.
They left my office and they said, we'll call you in an hour. And they were supposed to take my helicopter, but they didn't want to wait for 2 hours because mine was coming back. So they rented a helicopter from an outside company that probably didn't know what they were doing.
The people in that helicopter crash were some of Trump's top casino executives. This would lead to bad things soon enough. On top of that, Wall Street crash causing a recession.
Friday the 13th of October, 1989, Wall Street crashed.
There was panic in the air. The calls from Donald were, how much cash do you have in the bank right now? And I'd be like, geez, we've got $3 million in the bank. Well, send me $1.5 million of it. And that was just a new way of doing business.
The reason why Trump was panicking so much over this recession because it was nothing short of bad timing. His latest casino, the Taj Mahal, was almost finished and scheduled to be opened very soon. But on the other hand, Trump brought out a board game. I mean, it did alright, but it didn't sell as well. It was considered as one of Trump's biggest failures. But with the 90s round the corner, the board game was the least of his worries.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
Now, the 90s is considered by most to be a great and popular decade to look back on, mostly for those who are, well, you know, nostalgic. But for Trump, it wasn't any of those things. It was a fucking nightmare.
The man who was the darling of the 80s is seen in the 90s as a man in trouble, and he knows it.
Says money means nothing to him except as a means of keeping score, may be hurting on his favorite scoreboard. Suddenly, there's talk that the Trump financial empire is shaky.
While his family life may have been on the rocks, his business empire was crumbling.
The headline was quite accurate. Welcome to the 90s, Donald. Because it was like you got whacked right in the face. It was amazing.
Back to the, you know what? Do this interview with somebody else.
Well, we talked about this yesterday on the phone. This is exactly what we talked about.
Do the interview with somebody else, really. Yeah, you don't need this.
Trump failed to pay his investors and contractors, and mountains of debt were piling up. Most of Trump's funding came from junk bonds, where not only the debt was the issue, but interest on top of that as well.
In 1990, Donald had a personal debt of over $800 million. His interest payments were $1 million a day.
The recession of the early 90s didn't help either. This was not long after the Taj Mahal opened. Now, even though Trump claimed the casino would be a big success, it was gonna hurt him in the long run, financially. And as soon as the media got wind of his financial troubles, they were eating him alive.
He's got $210 million in cash and stocks. You dig back into the back of it and you find out that he's borrowed from a dozen banks, 190 million of it. It's all borrowed money.
Well, if it's not, what right do you have to say? What do you know about borrowed money?
All right, let me tell you what I know. All I know is what people write about you. You're right, I haven't seen your book. What they write about you is that...
See, if you were smart, you'd want to see my book.
Now, it is true that Trump borrowed from a dozen banks. But you gotta remember, in the 80s, everyone looked at him as this monopoly god, this big-time spender. So of course it would make sense that so many banks would want to throw money at him. They literally wanted to loan him money, because they know they'll get a piece of Trump's profit in return. But that didn't work out, did it?
Trump's bankers, who were throwing money at him just months before, were now at his door. And now the banks faced a dilemma. They had Trump so much money, if he went down, they might go down with him.
Things were starting to become a total disaster. The Taj Mahal soon entered bankruptcy. Then later next year, 2 more of his casinos went through the same thing. Even the Plaza Hotel went into bankruptcy. They were all trembling under debt, and he filed them all for bankruptcy. Keep in mind, there are advantages for filing for bankruptcy. However, there can also be disadvantages as well. But Trump went for it anyway, which is why when he was questioned about his bankruptcies, he responds with this.
Again, Chris, hundreds and hundreds of deals. 4 times I've taken advantage of the laws, and frankly, so has everybody else in my position.
But either way, Trump's reckless spending was catching up to him, and the Taj Mahal was only just the final nail in the coffin. His dad's words came back to bite him.
Fred told him, don't go to Atlantic City. Don't get involved in casinos.
And guess what? He did. His dad at one point gave him a loan in the form of casino chips that were worth millions. To help with the debt, he went from going on a buying spree to now going on a selling spree. He sold many of his assets to stay afloat, probably part of the bankruptcy process, and even made appearances and cameos in TV shows to get by.
Excuse me, but I've got something to tell you first. Thank you for ruining my life!
Ashley!
What did you do?
Everybody's always blaming me for everything.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
Times were getting desperate for Donald when he appeared in an advert with Ivana Trump.
It's wrong, isn't it?
but it feels so right.
Then it's a deal?
Yes, we eat our pizza the wrong way.
Crust first.
But Graham, Trump has been in loads of TV ads. Yes, I know, Trump has been in several ads and movies before. Where do you think this clip came from? But this particular one felt more like a publicity stunt because their breakup made headlines all the time. It was a pretty big deal. So it was probably his way of doing business as usual. Pizza Hut defo benefited from it, I can tell you. Anyway, Trump's debts were spiraling out of control and he has to do something about it. As in doing more than what he's already previously done, taking bigger risks and chances. He started off selling one of his most expensive properties, a bit of a loss to Donald, but it helped. But then, one day, Trump decided to take a risk. A bold move that could change things around. But it was a bit of a 50-50 chance.
Trump makes a bold move. He decides to float part of his empire on the stock market. For the first time, people have the opportunity to buy themselves a slice of the Trump brand.
By the way, this is what he's on about and how it works. This was a bit of a gamble, so it was either going to flop or succeed. So the question is, how did it turn out?
The stock market flotation was a stunning success. Over the next couple of years, he would raise over $1 billion.
Not bad work for a man whose casinos have gone into bankruptcy.
Wall Street has a lot of respect for Trump.
Oh, okay. Fucking hell, it worked out better than I thought. This was such a mind-blowing move that even some of his critics didn't know what to think of it.
That was sort of an astonishing development. I mean, this is a man who had a track record of not paying his bills, of not managing his enterprise as well. Donald gets paid at least $82 million, and plus $50 million is used to pay off debts he'd personally guaranteed. How could this happen?
And even the media couldn't resist this huge turnaround.
He's a guy who has engineered one of the biggest turnarounds in modern business history. As you sit there today, give me a one-word answer. How are things going business-wise?
Well, it's probably been the best year of my life from a business standpoint. One word, I don't know, can we say luck? Maybe luck.
Luck is a good word. We'll be right back.
Your empire was pretty
much more than that.
You owed more than that?
975 was personally guaranteed. That was just the small part. That was the harder debt. But I owed many, many billions of dollars, and now my company is much bigger and stronger than it was in the 80s.
This inspired Trump to publish another book called The Art of the Comeback. Not bad for someone who was in millions and millions of dollars in debt. Near the end of the 90s, something tragic happens. Trump's dad, Fred Trump, passes away. Let us not forget the very man who loaned Trump a small loan of $1 million. And has given birth to such a timeless line. Amen. It's the early 2000s, and Donald Trump tries to run for president again.
Who thinks I should run for president?
He briefly ran a presidential campaign in 2000, and he was willing to give it a crack, but he had a change of heart.
I will not be running.
Not running for the nomination of the Reform Party, or not considering any run for the presidency this time around?
Not considering a run.
But even though Trump said no again, the skills he learned from campaigning will be essential later on. Fast forward a few years later, Trump decided, I want to make a TV show, and calling the show a hit would be an understatement.
At first, Trump didn't realize what a phenomenon the show would be. The Apprentice was a giant hit.
You're fired!
This is, without a single shred of doubt, the biggest amount of exposure that Donald Trump has gotten in years. Now, I know Trump had a big reputation as a businessman and a real estate developer. Also, I haven't forgotten, he's made a few appearances in a bunch of ads, TV shows, movies here and there. But once The Apprentice happened, he became a worldwide superstar. Here's an interesting fact. Somewhere between 2004 and 2006, there were rumours speculating that they were going to rebuild Ground Zero with new buildings and a new tower. The Freedom Tower. Trump got wind of this and did not like it one bit. His idea was to rebuild the Twin Towers exactly how they originally were, but taller, stronger, and better.
What I want to see built is the World Trade Center stronger and maybe a story taller. And that's what everybody wants. We should have the World Trade Center bigger and better. But it's a terrible design. And not only the Freedom Tower, the buildings around it, they have roofs at all different angles. It looks like a junkyard, and it shouldn't be built.
Now, I'm not getting into the whole 9/11 conspiracy thing, but Trump has something very interesting to say to add to the discussion.
I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through this deal? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall.
Anyway, moving on. Trump has always been an opinionated and a politically incorrect person against sources like the liberal media, like CNN, as he infamously names them.
You are fake news.
He's been attacking and playing the media at their own game for years. So why stop there? But in 2009, Donald Trump's Twitter account was born.
This was a way to directly communicate to his fans at the time. It was not just going to be fans of the book, but fans of The Celebrity Apprentice or anything. And he sat there, he thought about it. He said, I like it. Let's do it. And that was it.
Oh, mate. If only you knew the hell you created.
Okay, here we go. Huge tweet. This is going to be a sweet tweet. Here it comes.
The very thing that didn't seem like a big deal at the time now causes fucking havoc over a single tweet. And I find that extremely fucking funny. Every time the news talks about Donald Trump, they always gotta squeeze in the fact that he tweeted something really mean. Speaking of wreaking havoc, Trump decided to add his 2 cents into a discussion that would become one of the biggest stories of 2011.
Why doesn't he show his birth certificate? And you know what?
No one has ever asked George Bush or said to George Bush.
But George Bush was born in this country.
All I want to do is see this guy's birth certificate.
Eventually, Obama did reveal his birth certificate, but I believe this whole birth certificate matter would lead to something a lot bigger than people realise. As dramatic as this may sound, there was one night in 2011 that was the night that people considered that changed not only Trump, but America and the world forever.
He left early. The people in that room at the White House Correspondents' Dinner were making fun of Donald Trump. I believe, really, this was the night that set him on the path to the presidency.
And that's where we are today. Trump finally announces, after rumours and speculation, that he would run for president. Then there was a 2016 election. And then, well, you know the rest. Now, I am aware of a few things I've missed out, like Trump going bankrupt again, other ventures, and his first year in office. But honestly, I can't be arsed going through all that. Right now, I'm too fucking lazy to go through all that. You're more than welcome to look that shit up yourselves, cause I feel as if I've talked about Trump quite enough. But what I will explain is the $1 million question. Why didn't he run for president sooner when he had numerous chances and opportunities to do so, but does it now all of a sudden? Well, for one, I feel as if Obama had a lot to do with that. But the biggest factor, I feel, is his age. Trump is like now, what, in his 70s? So with that in mind, he knows that this would be his last chance.
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.